My name is Elaine Parker. I am 62 years old, a retired nurse who has lived most of her life in Philadelphia. I never thought I would be the kind of mother who had to measure the distance between her own daughter and herself by unanswered calls and half-hearted text messages. Yet yesterday morning, while I was pruning the roses in my backyard, the phone rang and proved me wrong. It was Lily, my only child. Her voice trembled with excitement, but there was also something hurried about the way she spoke. "Mom, I just wanted to let you know. Damon and I got married. It was a small ceremony. Only the people who are closest to us were there." She paused just long enough for me to feel the sting of those words, as if she were handing me a truth she had already rehearsed in front of a mirror. Before I could even swallow my surprise, she kept going. "Oh, and one more thing. We want to use the beach house in Cape May for our honeymoon. Could you send us the keys?" I remember holding the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Married, without me, without family, without even a whisper of inclusion. And then, as if to rub salt into the wound, she wanted the one place that held every memory her father and I had built together. The house by the ocean where she learned to swim, where we lit fireworks every 4th of July, where she cried on my shoulder the night she didn't get into her dream college. That house was not just wood and paint. It was the keeper of our family's story. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll get the keys to you." My answer was steady, but inside, something sharp and cold had already formed. As soon as I hung up, I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. The roses swayed in the wind, and I realized my hands were trembling. It wasn't just anger, it was grief, mixed with disbelief, and a gnawing suspicion that Damon had orchestrated every piece of this play. I brewed myself a cup of tea, steadying the cup between my palms. If my daughter wanted the beach house for her honeymoon, I would give her a gift along with it. Not pearls, not silver, something far more lasting. I would wrap the truth itself and leave it waiting like a present neither of them could ignore. The day after that phone call, I found myself replaying the first time Damon walked through my front door. Lily had asked me to make lasagna, her favorite comfort food, and she arrived with him on a rainy Tuesday night 2 years ago. He carried a bottle of wine tucked under his arm and wore that polished smile people practice in elevators. I remember watching him shake the rain from his coat and the way his eyes darted around my living room. Not as if he were admiring the photographs on the walls, but as if he were taking inventory. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Damon was charming, in the effortless way men are when they've rehearsed the script. He told me how much he respected nurses, how he admired single mothers, and how grateful he was to be welcomed. But every few minutes, he circled back to one subject, the little house on the Jersey shore. "Lily tells me about summers by the ocean," he said between bites. "That house must be worth quite a bit now. Waterfront property, especially down there, is a gold mine." His tone was casual, but the comment landed hard. Lily laughed it off, filling her glass, while I tucked the unease away like a splinter I wasn't ready to touch. It was only later, as their relationship grew, that the splinter began to fester. Lily started missing our Sunday brunches, claiming work deadlines or last-minute plans. When we did meet, Damon hovered, checking her phone when she left the table, steering conversations back to his ideas of independence and boundaries. "Couples need space from their parents," he once announced as though he were quoting scripture. "That's how marriages thrive." Lily nodded, eager to show she was modern and strong. While I felt the distance settle like fog between us, I remember one particular evening when I called to ask about Thanksgiving plans. We had always hosted it at the beach house, with neighbors dropping by and Lily bringing pies she baked herself. That year, her voice was clipped. Damon thinks we should start our own traditions. He wants us to spend the holiday at his apartment. Her words were rehearsed, almost foreign in her mouth, and when I gently protested, she bristled. Mom, you have to respect our boundaries. I said nothing, but the phrase echoed long after the call ended. Boundaries. In Damon's hands, the word felt like a weapon. The night I finally saw them after weeks of silence. Lily's smile was stiff, her eyes tired. Damon placed a possessive hand on her shoulder, guiding her as though she might wander without his touch. I wanted to reach across the table, to shake her free, but I bit down on my fear and stayed still. Something inside me knew that if I pushed too hard, she would slip even further away. I sat in my kitchen that night, staring at the untouched leftovers. My daughter was vanishing piece by piece, and I could feel Damon's shadow stretching across every memory we had built together. I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in me like a stone at the bottom of a pond. Every time Damon smiled, I felt as though I was watching a mask rather than a face. Still, I kept quiet, hoping Lily would see what I saw on her own. Months passed, and instead of drifting closer, she seemed to tighten her orbit around him. When I suggested a weekend at the beach house to clear her head, Damon answered for her, his tone polite but final. She's swamped with work. Maybe another time. Lily sat beside him, eyes lowered, and I understood then that my daughter was being spoken for. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Years of nursing had trained me to notice patterns, to trust instincts when something didn't add up. Damon's story never quite fit together. Jobs in consulting, investments he couldn't describe, and a past he skated over with a shrug. I began with public records, typing his name into every database I knew. It took hours, but eventually, a trail of documents began to form. There were court filings in another state, a bankruptcy connected to a family business, and whispers of lawsuits that had been quietly settled. I leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. The more I read, the clearer it became that Damon wasn't new to this dance. He had been engaged before, twice, both to women with families wealthier than ours. Both engagements had ended suddenly, and both women had withdrawn from friends during the relationship. It was as if Damon followed the same script over and over, isolating, controlling, and then walking away when the money dried up. The discovery made my stomach turn. I thought about Lily's tired eyes, about the way she repeated Damon's phrases as though they were her own thoughts. Boundaries, independence, priorities. He was teaching her lines, and she was reciting them back to me like homework. I printed everything I found and placed the pages into a folder. The sound of the printer echoed in my quiet kitchen, each sheet sliding out like a warning. I kept telling myself I wasn't paranoid, that I wasn't a meddling mother clinging to her grown child. This was different. This was dangerous. The following weekend, I drove to Cape May alone. The beach house smelled of salt and cedar, the way it always had, but it felt heavier now, as though even the walls knew what was at stake. I sat at the old oak table with my folder spread wide. The photographs of Damon with his ex-fiancée stared up at me, their smiles frozen, their eyes dimly familiar with the same exhaustion I had seen in Lily. I decided then that if he thought he could take my daughter and erase me, he was mistaken. I wouldn't storm into her life shouting accusations. That would only drive her further into his arms. No. If Damon wanted the beach house, then I would use it as the stage for a gift he would never forget. The truth would speak louder than my warnings ever could. The day Lily called to announce her wedding was the day my plan finally took shape. I had gathered every record, every article, every court filing that tied Damon's name to schemes and broken engagements. I stacked them carefully in a box, wrapped with the silver paper and tied with a white ribbon, the kind you'd expect on a wedding present, on top. I placed a simple card in my neat handwriting. Every marriage deserves honesty. Consider this your gift. I drove the package to their apartment myself, leaving it at the door just before noon. The sky was sharp and blue, but my chest felt heavy as I turned back to the car. I didn't linger. I didn't want to risk seeing them open it. I wanted the truth to hit Damon when he least expected it, when he thought he had won. Hours later, at 2:17 in the afternoon, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I let it buzz once before I answered, steadying my breath. You think this is funny? His voice was no longer polished, no longer smooth. It cracked with rage. You're insane. You're obsessed. Do you know what you've done? I sipped my tea, forcing calm into my tone. Everything in that box is public record. Damon, nothing I wrote is a lie. If you don't want your wife to see it, perhaps you shouldn't have lived it. He cursed, words tumbling over each other, before he hung up. My hand trembled, but not from fear. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a spark of control. He knew he'd been exposed. He knew his mask was slipping. The silence afterward stretched on for days. I didn't hear from Lily, not a text, not a call. The absence was worse than his shouting. I wondered if she hated me, if she believed his story that I was meddling, jealous, desperate to control her life. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation we had in the past year. Maybe I had pushed too far. Maybe the truth, once again, had come too late. Then, on Sunday morning, I opened the front door to find Lily sitting on the porch steps. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and her eyes were rimmed red as though she hadn't slept. She didn't say a word at first. She just stared out at the yard, at the roses swaying gently in the breeze. The same roses I'd been trimming the morning she told me she was married. Finally, she whispered, "He's furious. Mom, he says you're trying to ruin us." Her voice broke, and she pressed her hands together as if in prayer. "But I read what you gave us. I couldn't stop reading. It's not just you. There are other women, other families. It's like he's rehearsed the same lines with me that he used on them." I sat beside her, the wood of the step cool beneath my legs. "I didn't want you to hear it from me. I wanted you to see it for yourself." She turned to me then, and I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to race down the beach, hair flying, laughter spilling over the waves. "What do I do, Mom?" she asked. Her voice was small, uncertain, but it was hers again, not Damon's. I reached for her hand, feeling the tremor in her fingers. "We'll figure it out together. You're not alone. You never were." We sat there until the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the lawn. For the first time in months, my daughter leaned against me, not as a woman defending her choices, but as a daughter seeking shelter. I knew then that the gift had done what I prayed it would, not destroy her marriage, but open her eyes. And once her eyes were open, there was no going back. When Lily came to me that Sunday morning, I knew her heart was breaking, but her mind was finally awake. We sat at the kitchen table for hours, the folder of documents spread between us. She traced the names of Damon's former fiancés with her fingertips as if she could feel the weight of their silence. "I don't want to be another one of his stories," she whispered. That was the moment I realized she was ready to fight, not just to leave. I called an old friend, a lawyer named Marianne Cole, who had handled estate matters after my husband passed. She listened patiently, then asked Lily to come in the next day. Sitting across from Marianne's polished oak desk, Lily's voice shook as she recounted Damon's patterns, the isolation, the way he controlled the holidays, even the phrases he fed her about boundaries. Marianne nodded, taking notes. "This isn't just manipulation," she said gently. "There may be financial crimes at play. If you're willing, I can connect you with someone in federal investigations." 2 days later, we met Agent Nora Bell from the Financial Crimes Division. She was calm, steady, the kind of woman who made you believe in order even when chaos threatened. She explained that if Lily could gather Damon's own words on record, it would be enough to move forward. "He trusts you," Nora said. "That gives you power. But it has to be your choice." Lily sat rigid, her jaw clenched, then finally nodded. "I'll do it." The plan was simple, at least on paper. Damon had been pressing Lily about accessing some of her father's remaining accounts, claiming it would make them more secure as a couple. She would invite him to dinner at their apartment on Friday night, pour the wine he loved, and guide him into bragging. With a small wire beneath her blouse, every word would be captured. That Friday. I waited in my car 2 blocks away, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. My phone buzzed with Lily's text in real time. "He brought flowers. He's already talking about the beach house." 10 minutes later, he asked again about the trust account. "He says it should be ours now." My breath caught as I read her next message. He admitted he knew about the stolen funds. He says it doesn't matter because no one can prove it. I barely had time to finish reading when the final text came. "They're here." My chest loosened as if I had been holding my breath for months. Damon had been led away in handcuffs while Lily sat at the table, her glass of wine untouched, her eyes fixed on the papers she had left in plain view. When she called me later that night, her voice was steady, almost calm. "He's gone, Mom. For good this time." I pressed the phone to my ear and closed my eyes, letting the sound of her strength wash over me. For the first time in years, my daughter's voice was her own, unshadowed, uncoached, and I knew the storm that had swallowed her was finally breaking. 6 weeks later, I sat on a hard wooden bench inside the courthouse, my palms pressed together in my lap. The air was cool and smelled faintly of disinfectant, the same sterile scent that used to cling to hospital corridors. Lily sat at the witness stand, her back straight, her voice calm. She didn't look at Damon. She didn't need to. She was speaking to the judge, to the jury, to everyone who had ever doubted her strength. She described the slow erosion of her independence, how Damon began with flattery, then built walls disguised as boundaries, how he pulled her away from me, from friends, from every anchor in her life. She spoke about the pressure to use her father's estate accounts, about the way Damon called it their future, and how she had repeated his lines until they no longer sounded like her own voice. Each sentence came out measured, clear, free of the tremor I used to hear on our late-night calls. The prosecutor laid out the documents, the recordings from that Friday night, the text messages Lily had sent in real time. Piece by piece, Damon's charm cracked open like a rotten shell. His attorney objected, tried to paint him as misunderstood, but the evidence was relentless. When the recording played, his voice admitting he knew the funds were stolen, the room shifted. Even the jurors leaned forward, eyes sharp, as if they too felt the mask fall away. I glanced at Damon only once. He sat slouched, his expensive suit suddenly limp, his eyes darting as though searching for a script he had forgotten. For years he had written lines for Lily to recite. Now he had nothing left to say. The verdict came quickly. guilty on multiple counts: fraud, conspiracy, receipt of stolen assets. The judge's gavel struck like a closing door. I heard the words, "sentenced to federal prison," and felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't triumph, exactly. It was relief, tinged with grief for the years my daughter had lost. But stronger than all of that was pride. She had stood in the light and told the truth. Afterward, Lily walked out of the courtroom to find me waiting. She was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "He won't hurt anyone else," she said quietly. I took her hand, feeling the steadiness in her grip. In that moment, I no longer saw the frightened young woman Damon had tried to mold. I saw my daughter, whole again, her own voice ringing louder than his lies. As we stepped into the late afternoon sun, I realized justice wasn't just about sending him away. It was about watching Lily reclaim herself, word by word, in front of the world. A week after the trial ended, I drove Lily back to the beach house. The late summer air was heavy with salt and pine, the same smell that had clung to our clothes when she was a little girl running barefoot through the sand. She carried her small overnight bag like she had 100 times before, but this time her steps were slower, more deliberate. I unlocked the door, and as it swung open, she drew in a deep breath. "It smells the same," she murmured, her voice soft, almost childlike, like nothing ever left. We walked through the rooms together. She touched the old banister with her fingertips, ran her hand over the faded quilt on the couch, paused in front of the fireplace where seashells still lined the mantel. Her eyes lingered on a photograph of us from years ago, her hair wild from the wind. Her arms looped around my neck. She smiled faintly. I forgot this version of me existed. I put the kettle on, using the chipped mugs that never matched. We carried our tea out to the porch, where the boards creaked under our chairs. The ocean stretched wide before us, gulls wheeling above, their cries sharp and familiar. For a while we just sat there, listening to the waves. Then Lily leaned her head against my shoulder. Her voice was steady, though quiet. "One day, when I meet someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can give or inherit, I want to be married here, barefoot in the sand, with you standing beside me." Her words cracked something open in me. I thought back to the call that had gutted me weeks earlier, the cruel announcement that she had already married without me. That day I had felt erased. Now, here she was, giving me back the future I thought had been stolen. I kissed the top of her head, my lips brushing her hair. When that day comes, this house will be ready, and so will I. The sun slid lower, painting the water in streaks of gold and rose. Lily sipped her tea, her shoulders loosening, her breath calmer than I had heard in months. Damon's voice was gone from our lives, locked away behind prison walls where it belonged. What remained between us was not revenge. It was healing, the slow stitching together of a bond that had frayed but never broken. I looked at my daughter in that fading light. She was no longer the woman repeating his lines or shrinking under his hand. She was herself again, whole and steady, and she was mine. Predators can steal time. They can bruise trust, but they cannot erase the truth. The truth had saved her. The truth had saved us. And in this house by the sea, with the waves as witness, the truth would keep us whole. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.